Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today on Collection Lessons, I want to talk about cash. This is part of my Collection Lesson series, and anything you say on this channel is nothing advice. And let's get going. So I want to talk about cash. I made a similar video before talking about the function of money and the reason kind of money exists. Now I'm going to be talking about cash in a different type of sense, but still similar. So I said in the function of money video that basically the only way to get from my job, my working job, to get something I want is either I have to do something for that person, or you convert your time and your work into something called money, and then they do the same, and then you exchange money whenever you need something. You don't need to exchange time with each other, right? That's the whole point of money. Cash, in a sense, is basically if I think of like a funnel. Let's think of a funnel here, and I'll just label it cash. And then I'm going to have another thing on the side here, just called like the tank. And then I'm going to have things coming down from here. And this is called usually, so if I were to break this off, if you were to break this off into 3 sections, this is usually called your income. And then this would be called your investments. And that's sorry, it takes too long to write investments. This is what these 3 areas look like. Your income usually includes you making money, working for someone. That's 90% of people, is money comes from a job, which isn't a bad thing. It's a great starting point, and that's, you know, the best place to be right at the start. That's how you start. So you work your 9 to 5, you know, you work your 40 hours a week. This is a 9 to 5, your 40 hours or whatever a week. And that turns into money. And when I talk about money is usually, like I know in Canada here, they pay it out into Canadian dollar. So it's called CAD. Once you enter the CAD turns into here. The CAD is cash. So when I say cash, I'm talking about actual Canadian dollars, not a value of Canadian dollars, actual Canadian dollars. This is like your bills, like your, you know, or your coins. This is actual Canadian dollars here. In this section, this is Canadian dollars, okay? I think there's 2 here. So your Canadian dollars, let's say it is, I don't know, 4K a month is what you get. And in 4K a month, in 1 month, the size of this funnel that I'm explaining here, and the size of this downspout and then pouring out is all your water. When it leaves here, it's gone. It's gone completely. There's nothing left. It's gone. So this funnel and everything would be called your expenses. So the size of the funnel is called your expenses. This is the funnel, okay? This is your expenses. If this is like from here to like here and all the way around, this funnel is your expenses. What you want, and what most people will want, of course, is that this number is bigger than whatever your expense number is. If your expense number is 2K, right, that means that you put 4K in, you fill up the tank, you fill up the tub, and then it overflows into investments. That's where you want to get into, right? You want to, you know, go into a pension plan or whatever. You want to go into stocks, crypto. You want to go into US dollar. You want to go into, you know, investments. You want to invest for your future. And the idea is your expenses become so little that only so much goes out, and then you end up saving, or you end up, you know, investing, you know, a good amount. So over here you got like your stocks, you got businesses. That includes like real estate or retail or online store, whatever businesses you want. It's an investment of sorts. In itself, it's a business that creates income, which generally comes back. We'll talk about that later. You want Forex or whatever. So your foreign exchange stuff, or you know, other fiats, other whatever, other than your home base. But the idea is you want this. If this number over here matches this number, that's when you're living paycheck to paycheck. So how do you get out of the paycheck to paycheck system? Well, you either reduce your expenses, which means you either downsize your living either your living style, lifestyle, or your house, or your car, or you know, your animals, your Netflix, your subscriptions, things that are dragging you down. You want to make this funnel smaller. And in my case, I want to make it as small as possible so that I don't have to go and make another X amount of dollars. I don't have to work 2 jobs. 1 job is enough for most people, even most families, I hope. But that's where this whole idea of cash is the middle. This is the middle. Things that aren't cash are investments over here, right? And you want to fill up this pool of money, this tub of money, eventually, so that it, you know, is also like duplicating in a loop back system, if you want to think of it like that, in a feedback system where it's making more money as it's going. And eventually you want it to be your income. And then you can get rid of this 9-to-5 job. And then you're making 4K here, which then floods into your expenses, and then hopefully you can also take whatever your investments make and reinvest in some more things, so you're overflooding your funnel. Right? If this only made like 2K, you could technically live off your investments. But ideally you want your investments to make more money than your expenses, so that you can either, because expenses are always going to grow, right? So you can either, like, you know, have a good lifestyle or an increase in expenses or whatever. But this kind of gives a visual. So when I talk about cash, it's basically this funnel is always going down. The dollar is always being devalued. So you don't want to sit here, right? You don't want to have 4K and you don't want to be like, oh, my expenses are 2K, but my funnel now, let's just make my emergency fund and whatever. Let's just increase this funnel so that I can hold 4K. Like, I get it. You want an emergency fund. That makes sense. But you also want cash flow. And you also want investments. You don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck. You don't want to be 2 paychecks away from being broke, right? If you're 9-to-5 during this whole situation that's been going on the last 2 years. If this goes, you only got 2 months. You don't want that. You want years. You want years in this pool. You want years in this tub. And that's where I talk about the whole, like, active income, right, to passive income. You want to go from here to here. That's all retirement is. You want to work for 50 years or whatever, you can to hopefully retire on whatever pension plans you want. Or you want to create a business in 5 years that gives you this lifestyle in 5 years that lasts for 15 or 20, 30, however long. But if you create it so that it always increases your investments and not increase your expenses, that's the best situation, right? So that's where I'm kind of going with this, is you obviously want to save. You also want to invest. You want to do both if you can. But you remember, you can also save in investments, right? I'm talking about, like, these are liquid, as I'm drawing a water type, you know, example. These are liquid. You have your emergency fund, which is great. That's usually about 3 to 6 months of expenses. That helps you here. Then you start looking at your investments and you're like, okay, what can I liquidate so that I can fill this back up to be 3 to 6 months, or 3 to 6 months of expenses. That's where you want the liquid investments. It's like, oh, but I'm taking from my future. But it's like, I've seen people that have investments that are locked in, and locked in investments, in my opinion, are the worst things ever. Sure, it might help people with, like, that want to always touch their investment side, but if you just give people, you know, better financial education, like, chances are they won't. But I'd rather, you know, have my liquid investments, because I've seen people that have $1 million, stuck in some sort of pension plan, whatever you want to call that thing. They have $1 million in there, and they claim bankruptcy. And the reason is because it's locked in. If they had access to 100K to get by, you know, they wouldn't have to claim bankruptcy. And that's where I like this whole, like, not locked in investment stuff, is it can be totally liquid. I can, like, have an emergency, family emergency, health emergency. Things can randomly come up, you know, like something, insurance emergency, where I gotta pay for something up front. I have access to all this investment, all this liquidity over here that I could help me out now or whenever. In the meantime, while I'm looking for another job, if my job got canned completely, right? So that's the idea. This is the flow. The flow is your income. whatever that is, goes into a funnel, which is called your cash funnel, which out comes expenses. This is your expenses. And anything extra goes into the tub for future. It could be some savings, it could be some stocks, bonds, business stuff, right? Online and, you know, stuff that can give you cash flow that eventually comes back over here. So it's a different visual, I know, but that's the whole point, is your time is converted. In the normal situation, your time is converted into cash. What you do with that cash depends on, you know, your expenses, and anything over you should be investing. That's the whole purpose of cash. Like, you don't want to be sitting in the middle forever. You don't want to be sitting in this because cash is always being devalued. It's always going down. My voice is squeaky because I've been talking a lot today. But like, that's where, you know, people are like, oh, don't sit in cash because, you know, you might as well invest. Sure, your investments can go up and down. That's the risk you kind of take. But like, no matter what, it's still better than sitting in cash. No matter what, in my opinion. That's pretty much it for this video. I just want to talk about cash being in the middle of between you, your investments. They can both go in, right? You can both push them in this way if you had to, but don't make your funnel huge. Don't make your expenses match your income. That's not a great scenario. You always want to be more than. A 2-to-1 ratio would be good. You know, you make twice as much as your expenses. That's great, especially if you have a dual income. Then if one person loses their job, one person goes on maternal leave, if you have that, or EI or whatever. Even if you both go on EI, we have employment insurance up here. Usually it's about 50 to 55%. I think there's a max. I think it's a max around 60K or something like that. If you maintain a 2-to-1 ratio of your funnel for the income, if you both go on EI, you're fine. You both get cut, you're still just barely scraping by, and you can still make some decisions here, as well as if you need to liquidate stuff, you got the opportunity to do so. You don't want to be stuck in all these locked in whatever plans, you know what I think of them. So anyway, that's what I want to share this video. Cash, funnel, expenses, income, investments. Soak it all in. There you go. Thanks, and talk soon.